Welcome to A Course in Miracles, where you'll discover health and well-being through inner peace. Your host is Eloisa Ramos, EFT master and author of Beyond Self-Esteem, Discovering Your Boundless Self-Worth. Using EFT, the Ramos clearing technique, and the principles of A Course in Miracles, you'll learn how to open your mind to healing and to all that is inherently yours: deep fulfillment, vitality, joy, and inner peace.
Hello everyone, my name is Eloisa Ramos, and today we're going to talk about perception, what it is, and we're also going to talk about reality and how the Course in Miracles defines reality and how it distinguishes between knowledge and perception. And it's a very important distinction for all of us for a number of reasons. Primarily, it really can help us understand the law of cause and effect, which is what we were talking about the previous week. So today, to get started, I want to just share with you just a little example of a misperception. I was at a department store with my daughter, and we were getting some shoes for her, and we were ready to check out, and there was a woman right in front of us, and she was talking to the clerk because she wanted to return something. And so the clerk asked her for the receipt, and she said, "Oh, I gave it to you." And the clerk looked at her, and she said, "No, you didn't give it to me." And the woman replied, "Yes, I remember seeing you holding it in your hand." And she lifts her hand up, kind of waving like she had the receipt there. And the clerk looks at her again, a little bit concerned because she said, "No, nope, I didn't take the receipt. If I would have taken it, I would have lost it." And so the woman started looking through her purse, and there's the receipt. She pulls out the receipt, and she apologizes, of course. And I turned to my daughter and I smiled because this is something that's happened to me before. I give an example of that in my book. And it's not uncommon for us to make mistakes because we are relying on information that's not accurate. And in the situation with the woman, obviously she had some sort of recollection because she said, "Yes, it was as if she was seeing it in her mind. I remember seeing you." And so what's interesting about perception is that not only do we miss things, as for example, sometimes we're looking for something in the refrigerator and we swear it's not there, but then someone just points out to us, "It's right there." So not only does our perception miss things, it also makes up things that aren't there, which is can be a little bit disconcerting when we think about it. But it's very important to look at perception and understand perception, because if we don't understand it, it can lead to a lot of can lead us to give explanations to things that happen in our life that are really inaccurate. We can conclude things about ourselves and other people that are really far off from the truth, basically. And I'll give you an example that happens when we're young, when we're little. What can happen is that the child does something, and the parent finds out, and the parent gets really angry. They get really upset. And the child, of course, doesn't understand why that reaction is, because obviously when they did it, they thought it was perfectly okay to be doing it. If they had already known how upset their parent would get, they probably wouldn't have done it in the first place. Okay? So what happens is that we tend to look at cause and effect as if it happened at the same level, as if everything happened at the physical level, because our perception is based on our 5 physical senses, sight, smell, touch, taste, and hearing. And so when we only look at trying to get explanations through those 5 senses, we tend to want to believe that the cause of things is at the same level. It's at the physical level. So if the parent is upset and it's because the child did something, then the child is going to conclude, oh my gosh, I caused that upset, okay? Even though I don't understand why, there's only me and my parent, and parent was fine a little while ago, and now, I said something or did something, and now they're really upset. So they're going to conclude, oh my gosh, I caused that upset. And that can be really scary because a child is really dependent on an adult and a parent for support, basically, and for security. And when the child begins to believe that it's possible for them to make this, source of power and authority upset by what they do, and not only by what they do, but what they say or what they don't do, and the child can't even really understand what was so bad about what they did, that can be really, really scary for the child, okay? And what we fail to understand is that in between the interaction with someone else, between what they did and then our perception of what they did, there's something that we refer to as interpretation, okay? And that's why someone can do the same thing, and there can be 2 people, and they will react differently to that exact same thing. It's not because the act itself is bad or good or whatever. It's because the way that our mind is perceiving it and interpreting it is making it that way in our mind, and therefore we are reacting or behaving according to our perception, according to our interpretation. And a real good example of this idea comes from allergies. My children had a lot of sensitivities to foods and to other things when they were little, including asthma. 2 of them did. And what was interesting to me as I started to try to find some, help for their allergies, what was interesting to me is that both of them had a reaction to plastic, to touching plastic. But one of them reacted with a runny nose, and the other one reacted with a lot of itching on her neck and in the crease of where she folds her elbow, and in the back of her knees where she folds the leg there. And so this is a really good illustration to show you that there's nothing really wrong with the plastic. The plastic is not the cause. We want to say, yes, the plastic is the cause of that reaction. Well, why would they have different reactions if the plastic was the cause? And why wouldn't everybody be reacting to the plastic if it's the plastic? Okay? So what happens is that, of course, with allergies, it's not, there's an association there. Okay, the mind has made an unconscious association with a plastic, and the plastic now is just a trigger for that association in the mind, which then brings up the reaction. And the reason for that is explained in, or to help you understand it, Bruce Lipton, a Stanford biologist, wrote a book called Biology of Belief. And what he explains in that book, and he makes the connection, is that our cells, our body, reacts to our environment. But it's not just the environment, it's the perception of the environment. It's what you believe about the environment. so that the actual chemical changes that happen in our cells to bring up these physical reactions are originating from our thinking, and so therefore it's very important that we understand that connection, because it's what helps us understand the law of cause and effect, that what we see is the effect and that the cause is really in our mind. And this is it's a new idea, because we have not made that body-mind connection until recently. And so let's look a little bit at how the Course in Miracles differentiates between knowing and perceiving. And I also want to say that the title itself that I used for this program, Perception versus Reality, is also a misperception, because as we go into how the Course in Miracles defines knowing and perceiving, and hopefully by the end of this program you'll understand why that title is actually a misperception. And I used it on purpose, mainly because it is a keyword that people search for, and that is how they enter it when they search for information on perception and reality. They put them as if they are in opposition. Okay, so I want to make that differentiation, because the Course in Miracles does not look at it as opposition. Reality and perception are not in opposition. When it talks about perceiving, it's talking about the conscious level of our mind, the conceptual mind that uses the physical senses for information, and that includes interpretation and memory and judgment. And knowing, when it talks about knowing, and this is interesting because when we talk about perception, we use the word knowing. How do I know what something is? And how do I know that I know something? And when we rely on our past learning or past information or our physical senses, we're not getting certainty out of it, because there's always a updating that goes on every day with information and past learning. We see it all the time in industry and in schools. Theories that were accepted at one time in the past are no longer accepted, or they're debunked, or whatever. And of course our physical senses, always they make mistakes. We say something to somebody else and they hear something different, or we can see something and believe that it's a person that we know, and we get closer and we realize, oh no, it's not them. So there's a sense of uncertainty when we're working with perception. It's almost like, well, it's been this way in the past, so I'm expecting it to be this way, but it's not necessarily that way. And the way that the Course in Miracles talks about knowing, knowing bypasses the level of the conscious level or the conceptual mind. So when it talks about knowing, it is it's associated more with what they call revelation or spiritual vision, which is connecting to the truth with a TH, something that's universal for everyone. And it also contains certainty. There's a that knowing becomes, there's no question to it, there's no doubt. And let's see. What it says is, yet you can know yourself only as you are, because that is all you can be sure of. Everything else is open to question. And so the conscious mind, is open to question. Our beliefs are open to question. What that does is that it makes for instability, because we keep looking for something stable and we can't find it. Things are always changing, whether it's our own sense of identity and self-image, and that seems to shift from situation to situation, depending on how successful we are in what we're doing or not. That self-image can change, and the self-esteem can change. And so the way that we try to know things with our conceptual mind doesn't work for knowing our true self, because the true self just is. So reality would be that which is in the present moment, and perception would be an interpretation of what is in the present moment. I'm going to give you an example that happened to my sister, and she visits from Mexico every summer. She's a Franciscan nun, and she likes to go to Mass every day if possible. There's a morning Mass near where my mother lives, and sometimes she walks there, and sometimes she gets a ride. And on this particular morning, she walked there, and she often meets someone at Mass that can give her a ride back. We have some cousins that go there. And so that morning she got out of Mass and she looked over to the parking lot, and she saw our cousin there. So she waved to her, but she also saw that there were other women with her. And she concluded that there wasn't room in the car for her to be given a ride. So she decided to just start walking home. So she just turned around and started walking home. And what happened is that my cousin then saw her do that, and then drove and caught up to her and said, "Hey, cousin, what's going on? Why didn't you, want to say hello?" And my sister said, "Well, no, it's not that I didn't want to say hello. It's that I realized you had, a lot of people already, and that you weren't going to be able to give me a ride." And she said, "Well, no, I have room. See, there's room for you in the back. There's only 4 people instead of 5." So they came home. She gave her a ride. But we were talking about that and about how it was that she just automatically assumed that there wasn't room for her, and she didn't even really bother going over and asking. And then what was interesting is how my cousin interpreted that, and the fact that my sister didn't go over to say hello was a bit concerning to her, like, oh my gosh, why isn't she being friendly to me? There must be something wrong. So she wanted to make sure and catch up and find out what was going on. So this is how perception and misperceptions happen, is that we don't allow the situation in the present moment to really explain itself. We kind of superimpose our own explanation of what must be going on when we don't really know what is going on. It involves a lot of assumptions and of course actual misperceptions, because maybe my sister miscounted the people. I don't know. Maybe there were 5, but maybe one person was just talking and wasn't getting a ride. So yes, so that's how we make a lot of mistakes. And the problem is that when we do that, we begin to distrust our mind. We begin to distrust ourselves. That can happen because there's this inconsistency in our behavior. and therefore, if you see that over a long period of time, you can actually come to believe that you're not trustworthy. Oh my gosh, I make mistakes. That means I'm not trustworthy, and so that of course added to the fact that perception shows us a very inconsistent and unstable world can really bring up a lot of fear. And that in turn can make us want to control things, control the world, to get a sense of stability, because it's very scary to not have that sense of stability. And unfortunately, if we go into fear, then we're back into misperception, and then that's just going to help. That's just going to cause more inaccuracies and mistakes, and that's just going to increase our fear that we're not trustworthy. And so it's this loop that gets going. Now, some of us can feel like our perception is fairly trustworthy. I mean, I certainly felt that way, but I could catch myself misperceiving things. And so for those of us that rely on perception and feel comfortable with it, what we do is then we try to use perception to solve our problems. Problems that come up, we do our best to find solutions, but the solutions are going to be at the physical level. And often that works, that's enough, but some of the issues that are deeper obviously take us into the emotional and the mental and the spiritual level. And so when we only limit ourselves to the physical level, we end up experiencing not finding a solution to a problem, and we end up experiencing failure and feeling like maybe this is something that can't be solved, that the situation is hopeless. So it's a little bit like the process with perception is a little bit like this. Say that a person was in their house and they were about to go out, and they had their keys in their hands, but they lost track of them. And in the meantime, the lights go out in their house. So now they're trying to find the keys in the dark. And after a while, they can't find them. And they notice that there's a light in the street, that there's a lamppost in the street. Okay, and so they decide, oh gosh, there's light over there, I'll be able to see better. So they go outside and they start looking on the ground. And then a neighbor comes by and says, oh, what are you looking for? Maybe I can help you. And he says, oh yeah, I lost my keys, so I'm trying to find them. And the neighbor says, okay. So he gets down, starts looking, and then he says, well, where were you when you dropped them or when you lost them? And he said, oh, I was in my house. Okay, and so the point is that perception takes us outside of ourselves to look for what we have lost. Just because that's the conscious level, that's where the awareness, where the light is. Okay, but we're not going to find the keys there because that's not where we dropped them. That's not the origin or the cause of the problem, and the cause of the problem is inside, basically. And so, in a way, perception has to fail us in order for us to figure out that, okay, I need to change my strategy, and maybe I need to, think about where is the cause of my problem, really. Okay, so let's see. There's something else I want to talk about before we go into the I'm going to go over the lessons 20 to 32, I believe, in A Course in Miracles. But I also want to bring up something that came to my attention this week. And it came from a video that I watched. Someone recommended the video. It's a National Geographic video, and it's on. It's a study. It's a study on stress, basically. But it's a researcher from Stanford that has done research with baboons, and with the idea of hierarchy and how that affects stress. It's a very interesting video. If you're interested in watching it, let's see, you can search for it under Stress, National Geographic, and then the title of it is A Portrait of a Killer, National Geographic's. And it's a very interesting video, and it makes some very important points about the connection between stress and the hierarchy structure of the baboons. Okay, but what I found also interesting is that the very title that they gave you, A Portrait of a Killer, for many of us, that title in itself is going to trigger stress, because it's going to put us in survival mode, and because we have associations to the word killer, okay, to death, and the word itself can switch you over from your body from a state of growth and regeneration over to a state of fear and survival. So I don't think that they intentionally did that, but if you do watch it, just notice how they are portraying the stress, because they're actually turning it into a threat. Because let's see, there was another word that they use. I can't remember what it was now, but it also had to do with it being a threat to your life. Okay, and so so what I want to point out is this idea of hierarchy, because it's going to help me explain perception. Okay, let's see, my sister and my cousins, the same sister and cousins that I was telling you about, came in, and we sat around the dining room table, and a conversation started up. Now there was my sister's older than I am, and there was another sister that was older than I am, and then there was my cousin that's also older than I am, and there was a friend, and then there was my aunt who's in her 80s. Okay, and she was next to me. And they started talking, and what I noticed, because I didn't really get into the conversation, I was just kind of observing, I noticed that my aunt, who was right next to me, kept trying to contribute something. She kept trying to say something. She attempted it like 2 times, but she wasn't able to get people, the rest of the people to give her the attention to continue. They would either just keep talking, or someone else would start saying something. And the third time she tried it, I just basically gave her my full attention, so she could kind of finish what she wanted to say that she had started, because I could see that she really wanted to contribute, and that there wasn't room there for her. The other, women there were not they were not perceiving this, or they were just completely disregarding her. So what I realized afterwards was that there was actually a hierarchy thing going on between the different members. And my cousin was what is referred to as an alpha female, and she definitely dominated the conversation. And that my aunt had this position where it was a lower subservient position in some way, and in the way that it was, let's see, in the way that it was kind of acted out was through who do you give attention to, who do you listen to. And I realized that culturally in my family, that has always been a really big deal because it's considered disrespectful, to not listen to your elders or to ignore someone that's talking to you. And I hadn't noticed that before until then. So it was interesting to watch this video on hierarchy because the baboons are all, fighting for position and to see who's going to dominate and who's going to get, all the females and all the food and whatever. But the idea itself of hierarchy, it's not a real thing. Okay, we see it in structures in society, but what I want you to understand is that it's an idea that's in our mind because around that table when people were talking, it was as if their behavior was guided by that idea of hierarchy. It was almost like a mold for subconscious behavior, and they were just like playing it out. But the idea itself does not exist in a physical form. It's simply that some cultures have perceived it and therefore kind of rearrange their behavior according to who they perceive is more dominant or has a higher status, so that the person's behavior changes. And I'll give you an example from a client. When he was little, he noticed, for example, that his mother, who was from a third world country, would be very self-confident when she spoke to other people from her country, but when she spoke to someone that was from a foreign country that was, white skin, that she was insecure. He picked that up when he was little. He noticed that her behavior changed depending on whether she was speaking to someone from her own country or someone from another country. And the thing about that is that he learned from that. He concluded that that there was a dominant position for the person that was foreign and that was white, and that there was a power difference there. And so what these misperceptions do is that they erase the idea of equality. It's hard to see equality when people are behaving as if there is no equality, and some people are getting more attention or getting more preference or are getting deferred to than others. Okay, and so that's what perception does. Is it keeps us from recognizing what is at the most essential level of truth. What is true for everyone? Well, if everyone, regardless of what your spiritual or religious beliefs are, we're all human beings, and therefore, at the level of creation, we had all we were all created in the same way, and therefore, whatever that way is, would have to be equal. It's not like the Creator would make some people one way and make some other people another way, apart from, of course, the physical differences that we see with perception. Okay. Um, and of course, the creator would be making like itself. So therefore, you're going to make a lot of conclusions around who and what the creator is and who or what you are based on perception or misperception. And I want to go into the Course in Miracles lessons now, and we'll kind of tie it in with what I just talked about. Let's see. So lesson 17 and 18. I am not alone in my seeing, and I am not alone in experiencing the effects of my thoughts. I am not alone in experiencing the effects of my seeing. I am not alone in experiencing the effects of my thoughts. So our thinking, of course, is the cause of the effects that we see. But what these two lessons are indicating is that we all influence each other, so that with our behavior, which comes from our thinking, from our perceptions, from our interpretations, that behavior is going to be a guide and a model for those around us, and they're going to end up learning how to perceive things in that same way. So if we're born into a society where there's a very strict hierarchy, and even though that hierarchy is completely invisible to the child is going to notice, oh, okay, Mom behaves this way with this person, but when there's someone else that's in a higher, whether it's because they are more wealthy, whether they're more educated, or because their skin is a different color and they defer to them, they're going to notice those patterns, okay? And this hierarchy thing is going to be learned. And that's why we are not alone in experiencing the effects of our thinking. And that's why perception guides our behavior. Lesson 20. I am determined to see. And this determination to see is to see accurately. So I am determined to see accurately because I recognize that a lot of what I see is based on interpretation. And my interpretation comes from my past experiences and my past learning. And those are personal and subjective. So what we are aiming to do is reverse how we have gotten accustomed to seeing ourselves and others and the world. And the way that we have been accustomed to seeing things is in terms of separation, because we're only looking at the physical level, and we tend to look at the physical level as always in conflict, always changing, inconsistent, and therefore with fear. There's a lot of fear around that. Now, Lesson 20 makes a distinction between, or it wants you to notice what determination is. Okay, determination is not the same as force. Determination is more of a steady, unshakable faith. It does not oppose anything. It just persists. And force is more about conquering. It's more about the dominating. It's one side wins over the other side. So it implies opposition. And once you perceive something as an opponent, then that perception in itself keeps the opponent in your mind as a threat and as real. That's why many people say that what you resist or oppose persists. And so when we try to force change, for example, if we want to overcome old non-serving beliefs, force just doesn't work because in the process of opposition, we engage against something that we're trying to release. And the reason why we can release it is because it's fundamentally not real. But once we engage it in opposition, we make it real to ourselves, because why would we be opposing something that's not true or not real unless we believed it was true and real? And so let's see, lesson 21, I am determined to see things differently. Okay, so it's about looking at our memories, those that have anger, and it's about stating that I want to see this differently. I don't want to see it this way again. I don't want to keep reacting with anger to what I see. And lesson 22, let's see, there's a little bit more on lesson 20. Let's see. Determination is not the same as force. Okay, I already covered that. And let's see. You want to be happy. You want peace. You do not have them now because your mind is totally undisciplined, and you cannot distinguish between joy and sorrow, pleasure and pain, and love and fear. You are not able to tell them apart. And that's because the way perception works is it works through associations, and we have made so many associations that they can turn into a loop. And an association is something like if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. And we learned that in math class, but this is how it works. Say there's a child, okay, and this child is restricted from playing video games at home, okay? Well, when he visits friends, he plays them there, okay, because the parents aren't there. Even though he's not supposed to, his parents have forbidden him to, okay? So during his enjoyment of this activity with his friends, he's also feeling guilt, okay? And what happens is if this happens enough, those two feelings get associated together. They kind of go together, so that the feeling of excitement and joy is now also associated with guilt. And so now you're going to have other activities where you derive, excitement, pleasure, and joy. And all of a sudden, you're going to find yourself feeling guilty, and you don't even know why. Okay, and it's because you've created an association that says, oh, these two things go together, even though they really don't. But they did during those situations, and those situations happened enough that our mind made a pattern out of it. Okay, and let's see, lesson 21, I am determined to see things differently. Okay, so in this lesson, it brings up the idea of attack thoughts, and that took me a little while to really understand, because I definitely understand when we feel angry, okay? And we feel like, yes, we have a right to be angry because we feel like someone has done us some wrong. We've been attacked. But I wasn't real clear about the idea of an attack thought, so I'm going to try to clarify that a little bit more for you now. So it's basically any thought that puts you on the defensive, okay? It's a feeling that there's a threat in some way, or it puts you in survival mode. For example, if someone cuts in line, okay, and you judge that, and you judge that rude, okay, or improper, or unfair, or however you're going to look at that, okay, those thoughts are going to be attack thoughts because now you've turned the other person into someone that is against you. And let's see. Or it could be, for example, say you're in a situation with your boyfriend and you notice that he's paying a lot of attention to this other girl and that they're, starting up a conversation. And so the thought is that, oh my gosh, they're flirting and there's a threat there. Okay? And so you get angry. So those would be attack thoughts. The attack thought is, oh, she's trying to take away my boyfriend from me, that kind of thing. It's a thought where you believe that someone else is trying to harm you or take something away from you in some way, and that you need to protect yourself. Okay, lesson 22. What I see is a form of vengeance. So when you have an attack thought, you're going to look at it as if it's some type of vengeance. Someone is trying to get back at you or hurt you or something like that. And the problem with perceiving things that way is that it's going to make us feel like we are vulnerable to attack and to hurt. So what it says in the book is today's idea accurately describes the way anyone who holds attack thoughts in his mind must see the world. So it is from this savage fantasy that you want to escape. Let's see. It should be a happy discovery to realize that this world of vengeance is not real, because you made what you would destroy. Everything that you hate and would attack and kill, all that you fear does not exist. Let's see. Here's just a simple example. So if someone missed their appointment, for example, with you, and we take that personal, and we get offended, and we get angry, okay, the next time that we are late, or or we happen to forget a meeting, because that does happen, we're going to be afraid of being attacked and accused of being disrespectful or uncaring, because once we put out the perception and the judgment that we can be hurt by that thing, then we're going to feel that we can do the same thing to others when we do that same thing. Let's see. Okay. All right. So let's go to lesson 23. I can escape from the world I see by giving up attack thoughts. And that would be something like releasing or giving up the idea of hierarchy, which would then, in our mind, allow us to perceive more accurately the reality that we are all equal. Okay, and EFT helps us to do this because we are releasing the misperception by tapping on the emotions that keep those misperceptions in place. And that's why forgiveness is so important, because forgiveness basically does the same thing. It heals the misperception, and it reverses the misperception. And the Course here says, this is the only way out of fear that will ever succeed. Okay, but this way cannot fail. Every thought you have makes up some segment of the world that you see. It is with your thoughts, then, that we must work. There is no point in lamenting the world. There is no point in trying to change the world. It is incapable of change because it is merely an effect. But there is indeed a point in changing your thoughts about the world. Here, you are changing the cause. The effects will change automatically. And this is really, really important. I had a conversation with a friend over Christmas. Actually, it's an acquaintance because I only see him when I visit my niece when she has a party or something. And we were talking about this because he asked me what I did, and I was explaining to him what I did, and I was telling him I was going to be doing this radio show. And he had a strong reaction to that. He seemed to feel that going on an internal journey where you begin to look at your mind and your thinking, and the whole idea of a spiritual path, he kind of felt like that was being passive, and that we really needed to focus and address our efforts on changing the structures in the world. And I was trying to explain to him, and I can't say I was very successful, but I was trying to explain to him that early on I was very active when I was in college in making changes and bringing about, more fairness and equality or better opportunities or whatever. But I was trying to tell him that I discovered that because what we see, the reason the world has those structures that it does is because we believe that that's what reality is in our own mind. We believe those thoughts that says people are not equal. There's a hierarchy here, and some people are, superior, and some people are inferior, and therefore those structures are going to reflect that perception, and it's a misperception, like I said. And so the Course in Miracles really tries to help you to understand cause and effect. And the reason that you can know that is how it works is because in what I do when I work with EFT, we start with a problem that is a problem here in the physical world, and we go into the other levels. We go into the emotional level, the belief level, and then we go to the spiritual level, to the root of it. And once you release the root of it, then, miracles happen. Whoa, that pain is no longer there, okay, and it was there a minute ago. And so you begin to see how those effects can switch just like that. And that's why people refer to it as a miracle. And so let's see. The other thing it says here on Lesson 23, it says, you see the world that you have made, but you do not see yourself as the image maker. Okay? And that's the problem, is because we don't see ourselves as the cause, that we begin to fill in the explanation for what caused this. And so, the child believes, yes, my dad yelled at me and he got upset and he got angry, so I am the cause of his anger and his hurt, and therefore I am bad, And so we start making conclusions about ourselves and about others that are not true. Okay, lesson 24, because we're beginning to run out of time here. I do not perceive my own best interest. And most of us believe that we can see and judge what is in our best interest. However, because our decisions and what we do is determined by our perception